Hi, everybody. We are so glad that you are here. Welcome to our last webinar of the summer. This is our Make a Difference in the Life of a Child series, and we are just so excited that you are joining us today. Today, we get the just joy of talking to a brand new foster mom, Heidi, and I'm going to let Heidi introduce herself to us in just a second. But really, what's so special about today's webinar is that Heidi has just gone through this process alongside her husband and her kids. And so they are fresh in the questions, in the doubts, in the paperwork, and all that goes into becoming licensed. So this is going to be a great place to go as you have questions about taking your first step. So Heidi, will you just introduce yourself to everybody?
Yes. My name is Heidi Sampson, and Jonathan is my husband, and we um, have two boys that we actually have adopted from foster care that are in middle school. And my husband and I are both from the north, and we moved down here specifically to work with group care and foster care. Um, we recently moved just within Clinton, and we're just getting used to our new house and figuring out school for everybody. Um, so,
Right. So not only did you just get your license, you got your license in the middle of a pandemic. So before we jump in, will you just tell us a little bit about kind of what that experience was like and maybe how that was a little bit different than you expected it would be?
yeah, so it definitely, like with everyone else in the pandemic, things were just kind of open ended. How is this going to tie up? And our license had just been sent um, to state office a couple of weeks after quarantine was in place. So there was just a lot of questions about timeline or what our next steps need to be because DSS was trying to figure out what they needed to do. So it took, the same amount of time. State office was still able to get stuff to us, but it was the first week of July, maybe mid-July, that we were able to get our paperwork and our license back. It did kind of give us a big question as to when we would start getting placement, because we hear a lot that as soon as you get your license, they're going to call you and they're going to see if you can take placements. And it's been a really big question mark. But we've had a number of calls. We did go through some time periods where we didn't get any calls just because of pandemic stuff. But things that we learned even in training with schooling or transitioning kids, doing doctor's visits and that kind of stuff when kids come first into care was a little bit nerve wracking. We haven't had to do that yet because we've not accepted a placement. But but we were kind of saying, okay, well, nothing is open, or are we going to do virtual or things like that for school? So definitely added to the questions.
Right. And I think that's a great point, Heidi, as we are still navigating what does foster care, what does parenting, what does schooling look like in this kind of time of coronavirus. There are so many question marks, and you're going to be navigating that with your first placements. So I think you brought up a good point of there are obviously still kids coming into foster care every day, but the number of placement calls have gone down dramatically, while kids haven't been in school. And as we are seeing children transition back to the classroom, there is some anticipation that those numbers of children entering care and being placed into non-relative foster homes will likely spike. So, we're going to follow along with you on your journey as you guys get those first placements, but we'll go ahead and get started. So Heidi introduced herself, but I'll go ahead and just introduce myself quickly as well. My name is Kaylee from Care to Foster, and we have done about 6 of these Make a Difference in the Life of a Child webinars. And really, our goal is to just share different foster parent perspectives with you. As we've invited different foster parents to join us every week, you've been able to hear about navigating foster care with biological children in your home, navigating foster care as a single parent, navigating foster care as a person of color. And we've been so grateful to share those different perspectives with you with some really amazing foster parents. And today, like I said, we're really grateful to have Heidi to share about what is it like to be a brand new foster parent, because her perspective is just going to be so different from those who have been doing this for a while. So our goal is to just give you a really basic overview of what it might look like for you to become a foster parent right now. Obviously, everybody's journey is different. I've been fostering for almost 3 years, and we've had about 20 kids come through our home in that time. But no foster parent will tell you the same story. Everybody's experience will be the same. But the reason we keep sharing these stories with you from different perspectives is because the best way to learn about foster care is from someone who's actually doing it. From foster parents that have been in the trenches, that have gone through licensing, that have had the big questions and the doubts, and the have ridden the emotional roller coaster of fostering. So during our brief time together today, we're hoping to just answer some of your questions, help you to understand a really general overview of the licensing process to become a foster family, and then think about what you might expect as a new foster family as you start your foster care journey. Most importantly, we hope to help you take some meaningful next steps, connecting you with resources, with people, with foster care licensing agencies that are going to offer you what you need to be successful, to thrive as you take those first steps. And also, if you're not ready to foster, that's okay too. There is room for everybody at the table, and we need kind of all hands on deck to support children in foster care and to support the foster families that are loving on them. So Heidi, tell us a little bit. I mean, I think that this big question, am I needed? What can my role be in serving children? You told us a little bit about how you guys got to South Carolina. You know, you already had a passion for serving children and working in the child welfare system, but why foster care? Why now? Why open your home to children in foster care?
Yeah, so my husband and I have had a number of different experiences. Working with group care. We had a kinship care placement for a little bit, and we have adopted 2 boys from foster care. So we have had to kind of adapt how we change or how we work with children and try to meet this need in all different aspects. We worked in group care when we didn't have any kids. After we adopted, we had some kinship care, but there's just some things about that didn't really fit for us to continue. And then now we are fully adopted and we're ready for more things, and so fostering in our home is the next step. So one thing specifically, I remember the guardian ad litem, which for those of you who don't know is a like an advocate for the children in foster care in court, and so they represent the child in court. And they had a meeting we're in Lawrence County, and they had a advertisement in, I think it was the Domestic Violence Month, Awareness Month, or Child Abuse Awareness Month, where they put a pair of shoes on the steps of the one of the buildings in the square, and they put a pair of shoes for every child who had died through child abuse and neglect in our county. And that was after we were in the middle of our adoption. And that was one thing that kind of we could have said that we had 2 kids and now we're done trying to meet this need. but seeing those shoes and seeing two of those pairs of shoes could have been my boys, and could have been my children, and seeing even just in our county alone how much more help was needed. It was just very apparent. Just another, like, it just really hit home to see all those and think um, of the children that still need help. So our boys are very open. Um, we've had some struggles, but now that we're at this point after our license, um, they both have said um, we are glad that we have a safe home. And it was very sad and scary when we didn't. So um, that is another thing that just kind of pushes us to say, even our kids, middle school boys who don't always pay attention to the little things, are saying there are more kids that can be helped right where we live. So
That's so powerful. I think that reminder of this is not just happening somewhere else, but this is happening in our own backyards, in our cities, in our counties. These are kids that are going to school with our kids or kids that we know. Um, that is a really powerful reminder. And we know that every day there are over 4,000 kids in the South Carolina foster care system. That's huge. That's a huge number of children in care. And there are not nearly enough families to meet the need. So we know that there are about 2,865 foster families trying to meet the need for those over 4,000 kids. And there's that just means that there's a gap. There's about 1,600 more foster families that are needed to help ensure that children have a safe, loving family home to be a part of for however long they need it. And we fully recognize that there are so many big issues, within foster care, within the child welfare system that need to be addressed. Just having enough beds is not going to solve the crisis, but it's a great place to start. If there was a loving home for every child who needed one, what a great foundation for solving other issues within our systems.
Kaylee, I would say, as we move to the next slide, we hear a lot. My husband and I hear a lot of people who want to foster, but are saying, "Well, we can only do this age group, or we can only fit this amount of kids, or we have these things, just contingencies." And I think, especially just after coming off of being licensed, it's important to know that DSS has 4,000 children that they're trying to place. So if you have a contingency, they will work with that. If you have a bed, but it has to be a specific gender or whatever based on your own children, they are willing to work with that. So when you sign up for foster care, you're not just saying any child, they can just place whoever in your house. They are willing to work with you in different scenarios because they are very desperate for homes for children.
Right. I mean, surely there are very specific need, there are high needs. There's always a desperate need for homes for older children and teenagers, for large sibling groups, children with special, or higher needs. But there is a need for everyone. So whether you can just foster one child, I mean, first of all, let's take out that word just. There's no such thing as just, one child. Even if you foster one child, you are making a difference for that one. And that is powerful. And you're right, Heidi. You don't have to be open to everybody and everything. But if there is something you can do, there is room for you. There is room for you at the table. So I think for so many of us, foster care seems mysterious. And you're right, Heidi, debunking that myth kind of that you have to be open to everyone and everything. But we just don't know about foster care. I mean, Heidi, how did you guys start like a passion for serving children because you moved here to work as family teachers in group care. So how did that kind of passion start for you?
Um, Foster care and adoption. I have some family members and friends just growing up who were a part of that, and it just really, I don't know, it just really clicked with me that family can be more than um, just biology, or that there is a need for kids to have a family. So I grew up in a stable um, family, middle class. Um, I had what I needed, and I don't have attachment issues, and I wasn't scared all the time in the environment that I was in. And so I have seen that what a privilege that has been for me. Um, so that was something that I don't know, just seeing other people around me be involved in that. So before we even got married, we had talked about adoption and foster care. So we had been married for 2 years when we decided that it would be a good time to expand our family and do that through foster care and adoption. So we moved down to work at Thornwell as family teachers or house parents there, um, which is also where we met our boys. So that was kind of a big move for us. It's been an adjustment for us because at Thornwell we both were full time. That was our job and also what we liked to do in helping the foster care system. So that has been something that we have had to adapt. During our kinship care placement, we both had full time jobs. Um, and then we suddenly had two extra children. So there was 4 kids, and we were both working full time, which is much different than a full time job of caring for children. So now we are homeschooling our kids, and I am home, and my husband works full time, and I work part time. So yes, your question was
I mean, I think that's a great, you had grown up seeing people do foster care and adoption, or, they had life experience in foster care. And I think for a lot of us, we don't see that, or we're unaware of, um, you know, that is something that exists around us in our space. And so I think that there's a lot of myths and misconceptions about foster care. So just really quickly, children are placed in foster care through no fault of their own. It's simply children need a temporary home, possibly with foster parents, while their family cannot currently care for them. But the goal is always reunification. And a foster family needs to not only support reunification, but really be able to champion the family, the child returning to their parents or relatives, because that's the goal. We do not want families to be separated. We want them to be able to be together. And I think as we learn more, as we talk to foster families, as we learn from adults with lived experience in foster care, or foster care alumni, as we learn more, those walls kind of break down between maybe what we've seen in the media or in TV and movies, maybe what we learned as children, or kind of saw through different perspectives. We can really redefine kind of our vision of what foster care can be. A lot of the misconceptions are fear, uncertainty, unanswered questions, and so we're going to try and answer some of that for you. So, as Heidi says, they have experienced the foster care system in some different ways through group care, serving as kinship caregivers, which basically just means housing, loving, caring for children that you are related to or have some relation to. And they have also adopted from foster care and now they're fostering. So they've done a little bit of everything. But I think one thing that's really important that we do is just kind of separate, what those things are. So in South Carolina, and we're talking primarily about foster care today, fostering is temporary. The goal is that the child returns to their family. Always. That's the first goal. Of course, that is not always possible, but when it is, that will remain the goal for that family. So we do not have a formal foster to adopt program. That's a term that I hear a lot, that a lot of families might use as they think about growing their family, fostering with the goal of adoption. And that is just not a official program in South Carolina. Of course, you can adopt from foster care. There are many children that are legally free for adoption, which means that they are waiting to be matched with a family, and that family would become their family permanently from that point of adoption. Heidi, will you just share a little tiny piece of your adoption story with us? Just kind of what that journey was like and what it felt like when it kind of came to completion.
Yeah. So I would say, kind of as a preface to this, which is also kind of what we talked about in the last slide. So a lot of times we hear that they couldn't get attached to a child and then let them go. Um, and that kind of ties into our foster and adoption story. When you have kids come into your home and the first thing you think is they're only with us for a time and then they're going back home, it really sets you up to foster a good relationship with them and to be ready to release them back to bio family. Um, but when you, there have been some kids that we have seen come through group care, that we think, oh, these kids are going to stay here. These kids are definitely not going to go home. And then when reunification happens, it makes it much more difficult when you kind of set that up to begin with. So that is one thing that when we met our boys, that I was really trying to be careful of, wanting to push for reunification, and not start our relationship with them with the intent of they're not going to go back home. So we have seen there's something to be said for the detachment of biological family. Um, so we may give them a different life than what they would have with their bio family, but they also live with a loss that's much different. Um, so um, we didn't want that for our kids, but it seemed that our boys didn't really have an advocate. A lot of times, family members will, when they hear that their niece and nephew or their grandchildren are in foster care, they will try to get those kids, or do a kinship care or foster in their home, because they are related to them. And it seems that our boys just didn't have, um, I don't know, I think almost all the kids we've had in group care, there's been at least one family member or a teacher or someone who has wanted to visit or keep up with them or check in on them. And our boys just didn't have that. So right from the start, that kind of grabbed our hearts, that they really needed an advocate more than some of our other kids. So just as time went on, it was a long process for us. So we the adoption process is similar to the foster license process. There's just some different classes and training. Um, so we had to go through that process. There's a few, just we had the same home inspections and interviews with the home study and things like that, but they're just looking for a few different things. Some of the questions were a little bit different, but for the most part, it was very similar. Um, so we had to wait for TPR, or the termination of parental rights, and that took about 2 years for our boys to have their parental rights terminated. So they lived in group care with us, and then once we started the adoption process and they were TPR'd, they moved in. We moved out of the group home and into a private home where we did our own full-time jobs, and the boys moved in with us. So from that point, it's the same. The caseworkers would come visit each month. The adoption worker would come visit each month. The guardian, anyone involved in their foster care case would still come and visit. Our process kind of got, because we had moved jobs and things like that, just kind of got interrupted a number of times. But we continued. We were very adamant that we didn't want these boys to go elsewhere. So they were in foster care for 1,002 days before we adopted them. And that was November of 2017 is when we officially adopted and they became Sampsons. So I think one thing for us is that adoption is just a piece of paper. I mean, it's not just a piece of paper, but as far as living with children, there was definitely a point of them saying, our name is Sampson now, and that definitely has, I think, healing in that, like knowledge of permanency, but it also didn't necessarily just change their behaviors or the things that they struggled with. There was a new element of grief. They always, I mean, as we met them when they were 6 and 7, so, or 6 and 8. So it was just, as a child, you always think that your bio parents are going to come back, or they're going to visit, or you could always go back home. And that cutting that off after our adoption was final, when there wasn't any connection to that, brought its own set of behaviors. And we've done a lot of therapy, and all together and separately, because it is definitely it can be very rough. It's definitely not. That's one difference in foster care and adoption, is fostering. You try to foster that relationship with their bio family, and they get visits and they do other things. And then once that adoption decree is signed, or that termination of rights happens, then there's no connection there. They don't see them again. They don't continue to hear about updates of their parents from their caseworker and stuff like that. And it's definitely an adjustment, I think, for kids of any age. So,
yeah. Well, thank you so much, Heidi. And just like we said, every foster parent's journey is different. Every adoption story is different, but thank you so much for sharing yours with us. And if you are interested in adopting from foster care, you can visit the DSS website for South Carolina. You can look at websites like Adopt US Kids to learn more about the children that are waiting for permanent families. And of course, there are other options for adoption as well, both domestic and international adoption, which is private, not through the foster care system. But Heidi talked about some really important barriers to fostering already. One that she mentioned that is probably the most common that we hear is, I would just get too attached. I wouldn't be able to say goodbye. That would break my heart to say goodbye to a child. And yeah, sometimes goodbye is really hard. My family has said a lot of goodbyes, and some of them have been really painful. But the joy of reunification almost always accompanies, if not overshadows, that grief of loss for your family. Because you know that family has been reunited, they have been restored, those parents have worked hard on their treatment plan, and there is so much to celebrate in that. there are other barriers to foster. Often one spouse isn't on board. And Heidi's husband says that she's the gas and he's the brakes. And I think that's probably pretty common in a lot of relationships. One person is really on board and the other person is just not there yet. And so people ask, can I foster if my spouse or my partner is not on board? And that is a hard conversation to have. And just like most things in relationships, you're gonna want to have some tough conversations, because of course you can foster if one spouse isn't on board, but the likelihood of thriving in fostering, if you're not on the same page, is very low, because anytime you add something to your family, you're putting additional stress. You're adding, some challenges. And if you're not taking those on together, that can really just burden you individually and as a couple. So, that's something to consider. Maybe one spouse just needs a little bit more time, um, or Heidi said they got started when they didn't have any children yet, but maybe you have children and you're wondering, how is foster care going to impact the children in my home? And the answer is, fostering impacts everybody. It's going to change you in so many ways. And of course, foster care is not for every family, but as you are considering what is the impact going to be on my children and on my family, it's important to understand, your children are gonna have to learn a new way of life, sharing toys and the television remote and possibly a bedroom. But we hear from families so often, and I would encourage you to watch some of our other webinars as well, that the impact has been highly positive in teaching values and character. Um, but my point really is, both as we talk about barriers and as we look at some common questions about fostering, it's okay to have questions and it's okay to have doubts. Nobody has this all together, that is for sure. None of us know exactly what we're doing all the time. So sometimes you have to walk in scared, and hold your head high, but ask a lot of questions and you'll realize that you're not alone. Heidi, as you guys have just gone through the licensing process, but you haven't accepted a first placement yet, tell me about some of the questions, some of the conversations that are happening in your home around, can we really do this? Are we ready?
Yeah. For us, because we've been around the child welfare system, my husband and I just have to admit that there are things that are still new to us in this system, and in these processes. Just kind of admitting that we are not sure what's going to happen, or we don't know things, or how everything works. So for us, we are fairly versed in child welfare over the last 4 or 5 years, but we don't know everything, and I think that's the best attitude to start with, because we can only go up from there, and learn more. So another thing for us was our boys. So we definitely had to make sure that they were ready, specifically because they've come from the foster care system. But they are now being treated as a bio child, because they are our own and they're not our foster kids. So that was actually, I mean, a bit of a tough transition for them, which we started talking about that with them, when we did kinship care, and things like that. But as they really have lights coming into the role of, they're not being labeled as a foster kid. They're being labeled as a bio kid because they are Samsons, when other kids coming in will not be. So that has been a neat thing. Our oldest, um, again, sometimes middle school boys, you don't know, or they don't know their feelings or how to say something. And our oldest has really said, um, that he wants to make sure that siblings stay together. So he's saying, I know that we don't want a lot of kids. Our boys are saying, don't take in a whole large group of kids. But if there's only two of them, don't take just one, take two. Or if there's two, don't take, I mean, because we have the space for it. Um, he's saying that would have been the worst thing in foster care to be split up from my brother because they were able to stay together the whole time. Um, so that's been just a really good conversation point for us with other kids' perspectives and just kind of using their own experiences to help other kids. That isn't something in I would always say I want sibling groups to stay together, but also when it comes down to it, it wasn't as high of a priority to me because we would still be helping one or two children, but maybe not the whole sibling group of three or four. But from my boys' perspective, that has been something that's become very important to us because they are so passionate about it. So
And Heidi, I think that you're already seeing, you haven't officially started yet with children in your home, but you're already seeing that change in your own kids of kind of the question of, are we really going to do this? To now, okay, well, if we're doing this, we're going to do this in a meaningful way and we're going to be committed to doing this well.
yeah, and I would say at the beginning we talked about I brought those contingencies if there are specific things that you need or don't need in your home. For our kids, when they had some fears or apprehensions, we said the same thing to them. So we, because they're old enough to help make decisions and to know and be a part of the chaos that ensues when you bring more children to your family, um, we wanted them to have a say, at least a little bit, in what was happening. So they asked that we only take one or two and that we don't do more, even though we have some room for it. Um, and we said, um, you know, picking a gender or age group, we let them have a say in that. And that helped them to see, okay, so if I really don't like 5-year-old girls, I don't have to live with a 5-year-old girl in the middle of this just disruption and this new normal for our family, taking in a foster kid. So I think that was helpful for them. It wasn't them saying, okay, there could be some crazy 14-year-old girl who comes and lives with us when we have middle school boys, so we're not taking middle school girls because um, of the everything that happens in middle school. Just things like that that really helped ease some of the fears and apprehensions of our boys because we were able to have them included in that conversation.
And that's so important. What you're saying is we had to assess what was right for our family at this time. And that's going to look different for every family. But you bring up a really important thought of thinking about age and gender and number of children in the home. I mean, and I think that, with that, there's just so many questions as families are new to foster care, figuring out what it means. And we're just going to go through some of those really quickly. And again, this is just an overview. This might not answer your specific question, but talk to foster families that you know. Call a foster care licensing agency. We've got a map on our Care to Foster website where you can find the foster care licensing agencies in your area. Ask some specific questions about what they recommend, about the types of families that they license, and how foster care works for those families that might be similar to yours. So, the first question we often hear is, can I afford to foster? And the answer is likely yes. There's no minimum income requirement for foster families. However, you do need to prove that you have enough money coming in every month to cover your basic expenses without that stipend that foster families receive for caring for children. That stipend really covers basic necessities for kids and care: food, clothing, shelter. If you are going to need daycare assistance, there is ABC vouchers that help cover that cost. Can I continue to work while I foster? The answer is yes. Working parents make great foster parents. But you're going to need to question or at least assess your schedule, your routine, your flexibility. Can I foster while single? Again, yes. Single parents make awesome foster families, but you want to assess your support, your own ability, and your flexibility. Again, who do you have on your team that can help you? Do I have to own my own home to foster? The answer is no. There are foster families that live in all types of homes, apartments, condos, townhouses, homes that they rent or own. There is no one model for a perfect foster family. And we've already talked about kind of age range and giving preferences. You can always say no to a placement call. You are in control of who is in your house. And that's really important. If if you know that you need to take younger children or older children to fit your schedule, if you need to take only boys or only girls because of the children that are only in your home, you can stand up for that and say, this is what we need. This is what's going to work for our family. But also, if there's a child placed in your home and it's just not working out, there are so many resources. Your caseworker, your guardian, counselors, therapists, teachers can support you in getting the resources you need. But if you know that you don't have what it's going to take to serve that child and their family well, there are things in place that child can be moved to somewhere that's going to be better suited for them. You are in control of who is in your home. And I think that's really important as we think about entering foster care. We're going to do a really quick overview of the foster care licensing process because we're running out of time. But there's lots of questions. How do I get started? Well, the first thing you're going to want to do is decide whether you're going to go with a regular foster care agency or a therapeutic foster care agency. Most families start with regular or standard foster care, your typical children that are coming into care. If you have some experience in the medical field, teaching special education, therapeutic may be a good fit for you. Those are children that just need a little bit higher level of care while they're in foster care. And once you've decided whether you're going to go standard or therapeutic, you start by choosing an agency. And there is no one best agency. It's simply the agency that's going to be the best fit for you and your family at this particular time. And our staff at Care to Foster and our wonderful Share Fostering ambassadors are happy to help talk you through that. There are families that thrive with being licensed through all of the various agencies. There are many options. They're going to differ by county, but we want to help you figure that out. So you can learn more about the process at caretofoster.org. It's going to look a little bit different depending on the agency that you choose, but generally you're going to choose your agency, fill out an application, get started. They're going to tell you what you need in terms of paperwork and appointments. You're going to host people in your home for home visits, fire inspection, probably fill out some more paperwork and do some more training. And then that will be sent to state office for you to be processed and your license to be issued to your family. So Heidi, really quickly, can you tell us just a little bit, as a brand new foster parent trying to navigate, thinking about first placements and things like that, what type of support is important to you?
So the pandemic has kind of changed that. I would definitely say, first off, people within your vicinity of physical support. So for us, just knowing family and friends who have fostered or adopted, people in our church have fostered and adopted. So having people that are kind of like-minded in that way, you don't really or truly know what it's like to foster unless you have had a kid that is not your own live in your home. So definitely the physical support, sometimes to commiserate and other times to encourage. But with the pandemic, actually, I have started the support group with Care to Foster. And I will say that at first I was a little apprehensive about what that would be or what that would be like because no one in my county was involved at first. And I just didn't know what it would be. But that has become definitely a great source of encouragement and just friendship, camaraderie, just in hearing other people's stories, even as we were in the process of licensing. We have had some people who are not foster parents yet and are just kind of interested that hop on and just listen to things. Or I was able to use some of my past experiences to help encourage or maybe give a laugh to some of the people in our support group. So um, that is definitely something that was helpful. Another thing that was super helpful is the foster share closet. So it depends on what county you're in, but there's a lot of them in different counties, or through churches that you can go and get clothes or shoes for your foster kids for free. They can help provide some of those basic needs. Sometimes they have kind of like a car seat swap, or if you need an extra bed or a different type of bed. Um, there's normally at least a small amount of things that can be shared through foster families, and that is very helpful on your budget. And um, you don't have to go to the store in the middle of the night and get something. Sometimes you can um, go there instead, and it's just super helpful to know that that resource is there.
And the best place to start often in any county to find those resources and those people is your local foster parent association. So you can search SCFPA, South Carolina Foster Parent Association, to find out more about what's available in your county and how to get involved. And of course, you can join our Share Fostering group on Facebook. Just search Share Fostering SC. If you are a current, former, or prospective foster parent, we would love for you to join and just ask questions and be a part of community with people like Heidi and I. And with that being said, we know not everyone can foster right now. This might seem like a crazy time full of uncertainty. Maybe you're just not quite ready to take that step yet, and that's okay. Not everyone can foster, but everyone can do something. So, like Heidi was saying, that need for physical support, you can be the support system for a family who is fostering, or for the children in their home. Maybe that's bringing a meal or offering to be a mentor or a tutor. Maybe that is offering to drive by the foster share closet and grab some clothes or shoes, or pick up a backpack at the store so that family doesn't have to do it at the last minute when they get a new placement. Everyone can do something. So we are so glad that you joined us today. And Heidi, thank you so much. We really, really enjoyed our time with you today. And Heidi, if you and I, we'll just go ahead and answer any questions that people leave on the video on Facebook, and we'll continue to engage. But thanks, Heidi, and we will see you all soon. Bye.